A little while ago, in one of our churches, I was in conversation with two other people, one of whom happened to be the minister. It wasn't Rob, so he's safe. The minister and one other person, and the minister has not been in post that long, and I know spends an enormous amount of time preparing for a Sunday morning service and sermon. And the third person in our little sort of group said to the new pastor, "How long does it take you to prepare a sermon?" And he was trying to work out how many hours that was. And while he was doing that, I was inwardly thinking, please, Lord, don't let her ask me. But she did. And I thought, okay, well, the only honest answer I can give is about 45 years. Because that's roughly how long I think I've been trying to preach. And the longer I go on, the more and more and more I find it's actually not so much about time spent in the study. You'd think I know quite a bit of it by now. It's actually simply trying to share from my heart what's worked for me and what seems to make some sense when lots of it perhaps passes us by. So that's what I simply seek to do for the next little while this morning with us, is to share something simply that I find works. And if you have a Bible with you, there's a very short passage I'd like to read. It's in Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6, it follows on in Mark's version of the story after the feeding of the 5,000. So this great event that's just taken place. And if you have a Bible, you'll find this particular piece in Mark chapter 6 and verse 45. And this is what it says. Immediately after the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowds. And after leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray, and when evening came, the boat in the middle of the lake was struggling, and Jesus was alone on the land. He saw his disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. And about the fourth watch of the night, he went out to them walking on the lake and was about to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. And they screamed because they all saw him and were terrified. And immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it's me. Don't be afraid." And then he got into the boat with them, and the wind died down, and they were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. So it's a strange little story, isn't it, in a way? But it does, as I mentioned, follow on from this incredible event, however we understand that the disciples, the followers of Jesus, had been not just witnesses to, but they'd been involved in. He was the one who'd given them the bread and said, "Take it out and feed the people." He was the one to whom he said, "Go out and gather up all the leftovers." And they've been part and parcel of this incredible event. But now things were different. This, if you like, is the other side of what it means to follow Jesus. Because sometimes the events are fantastic. And sometimes you're in a boat, crossing a lake, and you're struggling at the oars, you're straining at the oars, and it feels like you're going backwards. That's just how the Christian life sometimes is. And we read it there, I don't need to go over that again with you, but that whole scenario of Jesus absolutely exhausted from all the time spent with the people, he takes himself overlooking the lake, up on the hillside, praying. The disciples, the followers, he tells them, you go in a boat, cross over, and get things ready for me. Prepare the way for me. So even when you're doing and going when Jesus and where Jesus tells you to go, even then you can sometimes feel like you're going backwards. And the wind rises, and these disciples, most of whom have spent a lot of their life on this lake, they know its quirks and its funniosities, and here they are straining. And I just simply want to say, if your life is anything like mine, there are moments in it when even when you're doing what you think God wants you to do, you still feel as though you're pulling on the oars and you're going backwards and you're getting nowhere. And I need to tell you, if you haven't noticed already, but you probably have, that even church life can feel as though sometimes you're pulling on the oars and going backwards and getting nowhere. Sometimes. And then in the midst of all of this, it says that Jesus comes to them. And I don't want to get into how he walked on water. That's for him to know. I can't work out the physics of that. I really can't. But it says that he approaches them in the depths of the night. And it looks as though he's passing them by. And the disciples, these grown tough men, do what all grown tough men in that situation would do, is they scream like babies. Because they think he is a ghost. Fair play, I can understand that. But here's the little phrase that spoke to me out of this reading, and I leave it with you for what it's worth. That the whole story revolves around recognition. Recognizing who it is that's approaching this vessel that is struggling against the winds so much. And it's one little phrase, and it's this. Jesus says, it's me. It's me. Now, in this YouTube and TikTok video generation, of which I'm sure many of us are aware, you know that on the internet you can get videos of everything, can't you? From fixing a dodgy lawnmower to fluffy kittens to recipes to everything you could possibly wish to know. And for some reason, a while back, I found myself watching, it must have been a home-done video, obviously, of someone in a family videoing another family member who was coming home from service as a soldier overseas. And they film him coming up the street, and he opens the gates to the house, the family house, closes the gate behind him, and they're filming his homecoming. He's been away probably months. But there's a problem, and the problem is an Alsatian. Because the family dog is on the sort of porch here, and all he sees is this stranger opening the gate to his property. Who does he think he is? And the growl becomes a bark and a snarl and the teeth. And the Alsatian sets off down the garden path to sort this stranger out. But part way along the garden path, something happens. I don't know what, because I don't understand how dogs think. But somewhere in this dog's brain, something happens when he suddenly clicks who this stranger is who's trespassing on his territory. Actually, it's not a stranger, it's my dad. And this heap of furry growls, snarls, and teeth suddenly turns into this excited, ecstatic dog that runs and leaps through the air. And this poor guy who's got his huge backpack on his shoulders, this carrying this Alsatian, who is licking and slobbering and so excited that Dad's home. It's all about recognition in strange circumstances. And that's what happened that night, I think, to those disciples, those followers of Jesus, up against it, pulling on the oars, getting nowhere, and suddenly it's me. It's me. And that's what I love about these stories, because they tell me that in the most unexpected moments, in places where you don't think it could ever happen, suddenly you become aware of the voice that says to you, it's me. It's me. Don't be afraid. It's me. So let me just take you to one or two scenarios very briefly. Let me take you, for example, to the upper room, as it's called, that place where they'd had the Last Supper together, and then the awfulness of the crucifixion, the wickedness of that awful event, and the followers of Jesus now, afraid of what might happen to them, lock themselves away back up in that upper room, trying to make head or tail, common sense of this awfulness they've lived through in the last day or two. Everything they dreamt of has come crashing down, and they're scared that what happened to Jesus will happen to them. And eventually you've got Thomas. Now, Thomas has had a bad press, hasn't he, really? 2,000 years he's been known as Doubting Thomas. I like to think, actually, he's the one who was brave enough to say, I just don't get it. I can't see it. I can't fathom this. I want to believe, but I'm struggling to do so. And there they are, locked in this room, when suddenly it says Jesus is amongst them, and he says to them, it's me. Thomas, it's me. If you don't believe me, look at my hands. It's me. And all their fears suddenly are dealt with. It's me. Or I could take you to the garden, where the body of Jesus has been placed in a borrowed tomb. And a woman comes very early that morning because she wants to anoint the body with spices as they would have done. And her head is full of questions. But the questions are questions like, how am I going to get into a tomb that's been sealed up? How am I going to actually make this happen? And she gets to the tomb and finds, of course, that the situation has changed. The stone has already gone. And now the questions become different ones. Where is he? What's happened? Have they taken his body somewhere? Where can I find him? And along comes the gardener. And the gardener, apparently, only has to say, Mary. In other words, it's me. And the questions find answers. Or if we were to go on that road from Jerusalem out into the distant village, and we were to join that conversation between two followers of Jesus who just could not work out what had gone on. And along comes a stranger, joins with them and walks with them. And he says to them, what are you talking about? And they say, are you the only one in Jerusalem this weekend who hasn't got the faintest idea what's been going on? It's about Jesus, this man that we dedicated our lives to follow. And here's the phrase they use. We had hoped. He was the one. We had hoped. But all our hopes have gone. They've been smashed because he was crucified. And he goes, you know the story perhaps, he goes into them because they invite him in for supper. And somehow in the breaking of the bread, as they give thanks together, it's as though in that act, it's as though they hear the voice of him saying, it's me. Don't be afraid. It's me. Or we could go to the beach after the resurrection. And we could join in the boat trip with those fishermen who were struggling again. And we would be there to witness the moment that one of them recognizes that there's somebody on the beach ahead of them. And somebody recognizes who that someone is. It's Jesus. Again, it's as though he's saying, it's me. And you've got dear old Peter, who made so many promises to follow Jesus to death, if that's what it took, who broke them the very first moment he could, and who went outside and realized what he'd done and wept his heart out. And Peter leaps overboard and splashes through the water. You know what it's like running through water, almost impossible. He wants to get to the beach. He's embarrassed, but he needs to be there because he thought he would never, ever again be able to say, Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making stupid promises that I broke, that I couldn't keep. And I need to hear you, Jesus, saying to me, it's me, Peter. It's all right. It's me. You see, it all comes back to recognition. And I have no idea this morning whether or not you feel like you're in a boat pulling on the oars and going backwards. Maybe you do. Or maybe you still are glowing with the aftermath of being in such a wonderful spiritual moment of your life. It's like being at the feeding of the 5,000. Bless you if that's the case. Fantastic. As somebody once said, every day is a mountaintop experience. Some days I'm on top of the mountain, and other days the mountain's on top of me, and that's it. So maybe you're in the boat pulling on the oars and you're going backwards, as my granddad used to say. Or maybe, like the disciples, there is something that is gripping on your life, that's holding you captive. And you feel like you're behind a locked door. And you're fearful. And maybe we just need to retune our listening because someone has a message for you. And the message is very simply this: have faith. It's me. Or maybe, like Mary, you are full of questions, genuine questions, and you're not sure of where the answer lies. Maybe, again, in all your asking, in all your queries, maybe, again, it's simply finding and listening for the voice that says, it's me. Take courage. Or maybe you're like the people on the way to the village. Maybe you say, I had hoped. My hope, this was what I hoped for. But it's all come crashing down. It's me. And maybe you made promises to others, to yourself, perhaps even to Jesus. I'll follow you, Lord, anywhere and everywhere. And you fell, you tripped, you stumbled, you left the pathway. And maybe it's that's keeping you from coming back. And I want to say to you this morning, you need to hear the voice that will only say this to you: take courage, have faith. It's me. You see, all of this is about instilling faith and trust in the followers of Jesus. It's always about that. It's always about getting us to trust him more. Did you notice a little phrase in this story? It's a strange one in a way. It says, they were amazed. Well, we can understand that. You would be. But then it says, because they had not understood about the loaves. What a strange phrase to put in a story of people in a boat rowing and getting nowhere. They hadn't understood about the loaves. And I think that means, or it does to me at least, it means that they hadn't quite joined the dots. You remember, some of us will, growing up, hours of entertainment with join the dot books. You know, you followed the numbers and you had just this page full of random dots and spots. But if you followed where you were supposed to, eventually a picture emerged, a face or an animal or something. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to get them to see. You need to join the dots. That the Jesus who is with them in the feeding of the 5,000 on the mountaintop in the great moments is exactly the same Jesus who is with them in the darkness of the boat against the wind pulling on the oars. You need to join the dots. Because in both of those situations, the answer at its simplest form is this: take heart, be of good courage. It's me. And I don't know why, I've really been struggling over this message to bring to you this morning. My wife will tell you that. It hasn't been helped that we've got 4 little granddaughters staying with us at the moment, and some of them thought it would be a fantastic idea to play Grandma's drum kit at 8 o'clock this morning. While I was trying to just get my final thoughts together. But in the middle of all of that, I just sense that there are people, maybe just 1 or 2 here this morning, who simply, again, when you go home having heard the voice of Jesus in your battle against the waves that says, it's me. I'm here. I'm here. It's me.